Hello and welcome to the Starting Death Guard series, the series in which we go from your first purchase to your first 2,000 point army list and everything in between for the Death Guard forces. In this video we'll be looking at the fast attack choices for the Death Guard. And while the fast attack choices are rather limited for the Death Guard as they are for many different factions, they're still rather interesting and can offer a lot to a Death Guard army. However, before we dive into the units themselves, there are a few corrections I'd like to make. And the first correction would be that in the previous video for the troops and transports, I mentioned that the Blight Lords, Death Shroud, and Plague Marines enabled you to take Poxwalkers and Death Guard cultists. However, the Death Guard possess also bear all of the different keywords that enable you to take those units. The second and more important correction I would wish to make is that I said Malicious Volley applied to the plasma weapons, which were a rapid fire weapon, and while Malicious Volley is written that it applies to all rapid fire weapons, it goes on to specifically state that it only works with bolt rapid fire weapons. So unfortunately you cannot benefit from Malicious Volley on plasma weapons. You can only benefit from it on bolt weapons. It's still not a bad ability, however it does not work in the way I stated. Though that being said, plasma guns have seen some play on Death Guard units in tournaments despite Malicious Volley not working with them. Anyway, let's get right into the content and take a look at what the fast attack choices are for the Death Guard forces in order from most popular in tournament play to least popular in tournament play at this current time. The first unit we'll be taking a look at is the Foetid Bloat Drone. And the Foetid Bloat Drone comes in at a total of 135 points baseline with a maximum squad size of 1. And as the Bloat Drone is a fast attack choice, it actually has a rather fast movement speed for the Death Guard at 10 inches. However, compared to most fast attack choices, this isn't that fast of a speed, though it's still a very reasonable one. It also benefits from the fly keyword and has an incredibly resilient body, considering that it has a toughness of 7, 9 wounds, and a 3+ base save, along with a 5+ invulnerable save from being a demonic unit. All this together makes it rather hard for your opponents to destroy it, and I should also mention that it does even have a stratagem that allows it to heal up wounds when destroying enemies within combat, making it able to regenerate wounds that are lost over time. And don't forget, as it is a Death Guard vehicle, it does also come with a disgustingly resilient trait, which reduces all damage taken by 1 to a minimum of 1. And as such, Disgustingly Resilient adds on to that incredibly tough profile that it already has. Now that we know that the Bloat Drone is a rather resilient model, does it have the damage output that it needs? I would say 100% it does. And it comes with some rather interesting base weapons, being the Plague Probe, which attacks with its base strength of 6, has 2 armor penetration and 1 damage. Then it comes with a second melee weapon, the much more impressive Flesh Mower. The Flesh Mower gives it +1 strength, bringing up to a strength total of 7, 2 armor penetration, and 2 damage per attack. However, what really makes the Flesh Mower very interesting is the fact that it takes the 4 base attacks and makes 3 hit rolls per attack made, giving the Bloat Drone a total of 12 attacks when using the Flesh Mower. Considering the high strength profile and the decent amount of armor penetration as well as damage, the Bloat Drone can put out quite a bit of damage within melee, and don't forget it also benefits from contagions, meaning that it reduces the toughness profile of any units it's fighting within melee, making it all the more serious a threat when it does engage an opponent. All that being said, in this situation, because you have the Flesh Mower, you're probably not going to be using the Plague Probe, as it doesn't really offer anything that the Flesh Mower doesn't offer that's better. However, there might be some fringe situation where you don't want to destroy an opponent, so you try to use the Plague Probe in order to actually reduce your damage while still putting out some damage. In that case, you might be able to keep the Bloat Drone locked in combat and save it from some potential shooting, thus allowing it to survive a little longer than it normally would have. Though that being said, that's a rather rare situation, and I wouldn't think about it too much. Most of the time you're going to fly into an enemy unit and use those Flesh Mowers to cause maximum damage to them. Now the Bloat Drone also comes with 2 options for range weapons. Both range weapons are plague weapons, just like the Plague Probe and the Flesh Mower, and both of the range weapons do replace the Flesh Mower, unfortunately. The first of the range weapon options is to replace the Flesh Mower with double Plague Spitters, which function as a 12-inch flamer weapon that auto hits and has a d6 assault profile with a strength 6, 1 armor penetration, and 1 damage. And if you go with this choice, the Bloat Drone does go down to a total of 130 points, making it a little more cost effective. However, there's nothing particularly interesting about those 2 Plague Spitters, and there are better ways of gaining the Plague Spitters. All in all, I would say that the Flesh Mower is definitely way better than the Plague Spitters, and most of the time you're going to either pick the Flesh Mower or the second option, which is the Heavy Blight Launcher. The Heavy Blight Launcher brings up the cost of the Plague Drone to 140 points, making it more expensive than the Flesh Mower, which is probably what really keeps it from seeing play. Though that being said, it's similar to a regular Blight Launcher, though it has Assault 6 shots, a 36-inch range, Strength 6, 3 armor penetration, and 2 damage per shot. all of this makes it a rather reasonable weapon. However, remember one little issue with this weapon. Problem with it is that it's a rather long-range weapon, so it makes it hard to make use of those contagions that the Bloat Drone has on itself automatically and benefits the flesh mower significantly more. As such, I would say it seems like the Death Guard have a bit of a shooting tax because the contagions definitely make you want to be within close range and within melee. That being said, there might be some justification for taking this weapon, as having 6 rather good shots at a range of 36 inches is never bad, and it could potentially add up to rival that of the flesh mower. Let's say the flesh mower is definitely better, and it's a choice that definitely shows up way more in tournaments, though there might be some justification for the heavy blight launcher. Though in all reality, I wish it would go down in points a little bit so that it would actually be either the same price as the flesh mower or a little less. But then again, who knows, maybe we'll see someone do something with it that we weren't expecting. To wrap up the Bloat Drone and what it has to offer, we'll take a look at a couple of stratagems that it has. The first stratagem we're going to take a look at is the unique stratagem, being the Dark Craving. The Dark Craving costs all of 1 command point and allows the Bloat Drone to heroically intervene up to 6 inches, which is rather good considering how scary that flesh mower is. Though once again, this is just another one of those abilities that makes the shooting profile a little weaker. Once again, this is probably more justification to say that the heavy blight launcher should not be as expensive as the flesh mower. In fact, it's actually more expensive than the flesh mower, which is a bit counterintuitive considering that everything seems to benefit the melee profile of the Bloat Drone in comparison to the shooting profile, which costs more. But then again, maybe that's by design considering that Death Guard are written as more of a melee army than anything. The second stratagem we're going to look at is a non-unique stratagem to the Bloat Drone, but rather a stratagem that's universal to all Death Guard vehicles. And the stratagem is called Putrid Detonation, and what it does is for 1 command point you can automatically explode when the Bloat Drone is destroyed. And the benefit to exploding with a vehicle such as this is that the Putrid Explosion ability that the Bloat Drone has and other Death Guard vehicles have does not actually harm Nurgle units within the range, but only deals 1 mortal wound to enemies within 6 inches. That being said, the Putrid Explosion already triggers on a 4+, so it's not that inconsistent, and most of the time you're only going to use this when you really need those extra mortal wounds. Additionally, once again, because of the Putrid Explosion and the Putrid Detonation ability, it further skews the Bloat Drone into the melee profile than the shooting profile. At the end of the day, the Bloat Drone is an incredibly scary unit that can move rather quickly and do serious damage within melee thanks to its flesh mower when combined with all of the other benefits it gets from being a Death Guard unit. And considering how resilient it is definitely is worth the 135 points, and as such we've been seeing more and more of the Bloat Drones showing up within tournament play simply because they're so hard to deal with and they put out so much damage within melee, not to mention all the little other gains you can get from them, and maybe one day we'll even see that heavy blight launcher build, though as long as it's more points than the flesh mower, I doubt we're going to see much of it. In second place for the fast attack choices of the Death Guard forces is a unit that used to be more popular within 8th edition, however has fallen out of popularity within 9th edition, this unit being the Myphitic Blight Hauler and one of my favorite models within the Death Guard forces. Although the Myphitic Blight Hauler has fallen out of popularity lately, it does see occasional tournament play in small numbers, and really the reason it's probably fallen out of favor is because it has gone up to 140 points, which is a bit too expensive for what it brings, though a small points modification such as going down to 125 points will definitely see a major resurgence of the Blight Haulers within tournament play. What does the Blight Hauler bring? Well, it comes with a very similar profile as a Bloat Drone, moving at 10 inches with a 3+ weapon and ballistic skill, a strength of 6, 7 toughness, 9 wounds, a 3+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save thanks to being a demonic engine. It also has the Contagions and Disgustingly Resilient, as well as Putrid Explosion. However, it does not fly like the Bloat Drone does, but it does come with an ability called Foul Stench that gives enemies -1 to hit in melee. That being said, the Blight Hauler is more of a shooting unit and only has 1 weapon configuration with no ability to modify which weapons it comes with. Let's look at what the weapons it comes with, as it does come with quite a few different weapons. The first 2 weapons are rather generic to the Chaos Forces as well as the Imperium Forces, those being the Multi-Melta and the Missile Launcher. The Missile Launcher has 2 different profiles, with the Crack Missile not having a blast profile and being a pseudo Multi-Melta that comes at half of the armor penetration and none of the damage benefits of the Multi-Melta. However, it still functions as about half a Multi-Melta, if not a little more, meaning that in total you get 1.5 Multi-Melta shots when bringing a Blight Hauler for those 140 points. That's not too bad of a profile, and additionally the frag profile of the Missile Launcher can help clean up chaff units when needed. One unique range weapon that the Blight Hauler comes with is the Bile Spurts. The Bile Spurts have a 12-inch range, assault D3 shots, meaning that on average you'll be getting 2 shots, a strength profile of 6, 1 armor penetration, and 1 damage. This is a weapon that seems like a flamer, but it does not have the automatic hitting profile that a flamer has, so it's a little bit different than the flamer, though it's very similar to it in many ways. One thing to mention about this weapon is it does have an extra bit of text saying that it can shoot this weapon within engagement range, which seemed a little strange at first as this is a vehicle. However, this does have the blast weapon profile, which is a little bit superfluous, but I guess they just do that with every weapon that's not a flamer and has a variable shooting profile on a vehicle. So I suppose that's something, but I think it's a little bit more complex than they needed to in wording. Finally, the Blight Hauler comes with a melee weapon known as the Gnashing Maw, which uses the base 6 strength of the Blight Hauler, has 2 armor penetration and 1 damage. Considering the Blight Hauler has 4 attacks, it's not the worst weapon, especially when you can shoot all of your other weapons within melee combat thanks to being a vehicle. Outside of the profile and weapons that we've already mentioned, the Blight Hauler has one unique stratagem called the Belching Fumes, and the Belching Fumes reduces the number of shots enemies make at this unit by 1 to a minimum of 1. However, one major downside of this ability is that it has to be used at the start of the enemy shooting phase, so you can't wait and see what they'll target your Blight Haulers with, meaning that sometimes it'll be a complete waste. In addition to that, it does have another downside in that for 2 or less Blight Haulers, it costs 1 command point, but once you go up to the maximum number of 3 Blight Haulers within the unit, it does cost 2 command points, which makes it rather prohibitive. All in all, I don't think you'll be using the stratagem that often. However, if you find your Blight Haulers within a vulnerable position and you believe that they'll be targeting them with weapons that have multiple shots, this is definitely an ability that you can utilize in order to maybe allow your Blight Haulers to survive for one more round before they're wiped off the table or move into cover and are safe from enemy shooting. For the most part, the Blight Haulers are interesting and they come with a weapon that's rather good. If they were 125 points as I mentioned, they would definitely be a unit that would see far more play, considering that the Multi-Meltas and the Missile Launcher are rather good within the meta currently and will probably continue to be so for some time. More so, the Blight Haulers are not bad in melee, though they're not quite as good as Flesh Mower Blight Drones. However, that should be obvious as they do come with rather good range weapons. And at the end of the day, they do keep with the Death Guard theme of being incredibly resilient, considering that they're on the same resilience level as the Bloat Drones, so they'll be incredibly hard for your opponents to take out, though do keep in mind that the shooting weapons, due to their range, do not play the best with the contagions, although you don't always need to be relying on your contagions, especially with things like Meltas and Missile Launchers that have a high enough strength to not necessarily worry about the toughness modifiers. More so, you can always move in close with an enemy, and if you happen to end up within melee, you can still fire your weapons thanks to being a vehicle, thus making the most use out of your contagion abilities. In third place, we have the Death Guard Chaos Spawn, and this is the last of the primary codex choices for the fast attack unit type. The Chaos Spawn is a low-cost option at only 23 points a model, coming in unit sizes of 1 to 5 Chaos Spawn per unit. The Chaos Spawn stat line starts out rather strong, with a movement speed of 7 and a rather interesting melee profile, coming in at strength 5, 2d3 attacks, meaning that on average you'll have 4 attacks, and benefiting from contagions, as well as a melee weapon that gives them 2 armor penetration and 2 damage per attack while using their base strength of 5. They have an aura that gives enemies within 6 inches -1 to their leadership because they're a rather fearsome unit. In addition to this, every fight phase you roll 1d3 and randomly generate an ability that benefits their melee profile, with the 3 different buffs being Razor Claws, which brings up their armor penetration to 4 instead of 2, Grasping Pseudopods, which brings up their attack profile to 3d3 attacks instead of 2d3, which gives them an average of 6 attacks, and the third ability being Toxic Hemorrhage, which allows them to reroll wound rolls within melee. All this would make you think that the Chaos Spawn are a rather good unit, though in first glance it might seem to be the case. There are some issues in terms of survivability for the Chaos Spawn, considering they have no invulnerable save and no feel no pain save, but only come with a 5+ normal save, meaning that any damage that does go through will probably harm them, and considering they only have a toughness of 5 and 4 wounds, they're definitely going to have a hard time fighting off damage, especially since they do not benefit from disgustingly resilient naturally. That being said, there is one way to mitigate some of their survivability issues, using a unique stratagem called Grandfatherly Influence, which allows you to pay 1 command point for a unit of 3 or less spawn, or 2 command points for larger units of 4 or 5 chaos spawn. And what this does is you select the unit when mustering your army, and that unit of chaos spawn gains +1 toughness and benefits from the disgustingly resilient profile. It's a little annoying that you have to spend command points to benefit from an ability that should be baseline, although that extra toughness is definitely well worth it, as it brings them up to a toughness profile of 6, making them significantly more resilient for the low cost of 1 command point when taking a unit of 3 of them, considering that a unit of 3 of them will only cost you a total of 69 points. All in all, I can see there being some potential place for the Chaos Spawn within the Death Guard forces, considering that the fast attack choice is rather open, and 69 points for a unit of 3 Chaos Spawn with the Grandfatherly Influence and all of their other abilities could be a rather interesting unit to play around with, as it's a rather low investment, though I really do wish there was some way of giving them an invulnerable save considering they're rather demonic, or at the very least a feel no pain save, as right now they're really easy to take out considering how weak their save is, even though they have a reasonable toughness profile and the ability to benefit from disgustingly resilient. Oh well, maybe in the future they'll gain an invulnerable save or feel no pain through some other ability that's built into their profile, which would allow them to be a much more serious melee threat, though once again, considering how little they cost in terms of points, they're definitely not the worst unit in the world. Now to the first 3 choices, which are all from the primary codex. The Death Guard have 2 choices in the fast attack unit type from the Forge World units that they can bring along. The first of these units in 4th place is the Greater Blight Drone at 125 points with a maximum unit size of 1. The Greater Blight Drone for the most part has the same stat line as the Bloat Drone, however there is one key difference being that it moves 14 inches with flying as opposed to 10 inches with flying, making it the fastest moving unit within the Death Guard forces. However, I should mention that it does benefit from Disgustingly Resilient. It does not benefit from contagions, which is a little bit weird. That being said, the Blight Drone does come with a set of weapons that are static, similar to the Blight Hauler, more so than the Bloat Drone. The weapons that it comes with are definitely weaker than the Bloat Drone, being a Bile Moth that's an 18-inch flamer with an assault profile of D6, auto-hitting as all flamers do, a strength of 7, an armor penetration of 1, and a damage of 1. Not bad for a flamer weapon. It definitely has a longer range than most flamer weapons, as well as a higher strength profile. After the Blight Maw, it is armed with a Blight Reaper cannon, which has a 36-inch range with 4 heavy shots, an armor penetration of 2, and 1 damage per wound. Finally, it wraps up with a melee weapon being the Greater Blight Probe, which uses its base strength of 6, has 2 armor penetration and 1 damage. All in all, I would say the biggest problem with this is that all of the weapons have incredibly different ranges, and none of them have more than 1 damage built into their characteristics, so for the most part you'll be doing way less damage than most other units within your army, so what you're really going to be relying on is the mobility of this unit to accomplish what you want it to do. It does come with a Putrid Explosion ability as all vehicles do, and that 5+ invulnerable save as demonic engines do, though it does come with one interesting ability that is rather confusing when you read it out loud. To give you an idea what this ability does is that all friendly Death Guard units within 7 inches of a friendly Lord of Contagion get a special aura ability, and what the special aura ability does is it does 1 mortal wound on a roll of 4+ to enemy units within 1 inch at the start of your turn. It's a bit strange in the number of layers this has, as the Greater Blight Drone has to be on the table in order to give your Lord of Contagion an ability that gives friendly Death Guard units within 7 inches an aura, so essentially this unit gives another unit an ability that gives other units an ability that generates a small number of mortal wounds. It's a bit weird as there's 3 different layers and units giving other units abilities before one of those abilities actually does something other than benefit other units, and it requires you to bring along another unit or this ability does nothing, so I don't really get the logic behind this ability or why it's worded the way it is, but it's something unique at the very least that sometimes might do some decent amount of work within a game. Yeah, I don't know, this one's just weird. Outside of that, the only stratagems it benefits are the basic Death Guard stratagems that all Death Guard vehicles benefit from. I would say as a whole, the Greater Blight Drone is a bit overcosted and really banks on its mobility more than anything, though it does bring enough to the table where I can definitely see someone running one of these in the future, just as a unit that annoys your opponent. Though that in mind, the weapons are rather weak, though would have really benefited from having something like a multi-melta, just so it could actually put out some serious damage, as opposed to being kind of an annoying unit that exists. Who knows, maybe they'll change it in the future, and maybe they'll find a way of making Nurgle's Gift not have so many layers to it like some kind of weird onion. The 5th and final choice for the Death Guard fast attack choices is another Forge World unit being the Dreadclaw Drop Pod, and the Dreadclaw Drop Pod costs 115 points baseline with a unit size of 1. To summarize the Dreadclaw Drop Pod, it only has melee attacks and can drop in from Deep Strike with one of the following options embarked upon it: 10 Death Guard Infantry, 5 Death Guard Terminators, 1 Contemptor Dreadnought, or 1 Hellbrute. These are all perfectly fine choices, however, the value of this has really gone down due to things like strategic reserves and how common Teleportation Strike has become on many of the units, considering the Terminators can deep strike in rather easily, and most of the other options can either be put into reserves or moved around the table by other means in order to get into position. There might be some niche scenarios where it's good to have a unit such as a Hellbrute embarked on this, but for the most part, I don't think it's necessary as much as it used to be in the past. The Dreadclaw Drop Pod could maybe be okay in melee, as it has 4 attacks at a strength of 12 with 4 armor penetration and a damage characteristic of 3 thanks to its bladed struts, though once again that's quite a bit to spend to get those 4 melee attacks. Death Guard do have so many options in melee that it doesn't really make sense in investing so many points into a unit such as this that can easily end up failing to get into range. More so, the Dreadclaw Drop Pod does have thermal vents, so it can also move over units to cause mortal wounds with those thermal jets, but with a 12-inch movement speed it's a bit restrictive, especially if you end up wanting to use those bladed struts to make melee attacks against the different unit. Most of the time you're going to find yourself restricted to either using the thermal jets or the bladed struts, though sometimes you can maybe move over a unit, move to the other side of it, and then charge in. Though all that being said, it's still a bit awkward, and I'd rather just have a better melee unit for those points than the Dreadclaw drop pod. Overall, the unit has mostly fallen out of favor, and I don't really see it coming back anytime soon, so it's one of those things where I don't think it's going to see play, and I don't think the game is moving in a direction where it'll be very popular, considering we're seeing the prevalence of things like strategic reserves and other options to get units around the table without having to restrict yourself to something like this. Anyway, as always, if you've enjoyed the content, please remember to like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel out. And if you know anyone who can benefit from this video or any of the other videos on my channel, please do share the content, as it can help other players out in terms of buying and building an army. And as always, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons for supporting the channel. Thank you very much, you guys are awesome people. One other thing I'll mention about the patrons is I've received a couple new patrons recently. If you're one of those new patrons and you don't see your name at the end screen there, I sent all my patrons a message on Patreon asking if it would be okay to put their name on there, because privacy is incredibly important to me. So if you would like to see your name on there and you're already a patron, please respond to that message, allow me to put your name up there, and it'll be up there within the next video. And regardless if you're a patron or not, thank you for watching and have a great day. See you next time. Bye.